This is The Natural Upgrade, the podcast that believes good health is a right, not a luxury. The title of this podcast is Stress, the hidden driver behind your health struggles. So we're going to jump into stress management and all the things that it can do and how it affects the rest of your physical health, not just your cognitive health. So Jim, my friend, jump in here. And as you know, my favorite thing to focus on is not what you do, not how you do what you do, but why do you do what and how you do? So let's kind of start there. What's your passion?
Sure. Well, thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. And I will say that it's not quite 30 years yet. I'm not quite that old yet, but I'm close. It's close to the 30 years. So we'll leave it at that. So,
Okay.
no, Steve, my journey started probably like most other people. When I was young, I just didn't know what I wanted to do. Got out of high school, went to college. When I was in college, I kind of liked psychology. I liked the classes and things like that. One of the things that it was kind of whispering in the background when you're younger, you're not really sure because you're not really developed enough to figure some of those things out. But what really came through for me and the reason I decided to do that is, I know that I was put on this earth to help people. So that is what really drove me. And psychology for me was so important. It really was. And I graduated back in the, high school in the 80s and then, college in the 90s and then grad school in the later 90s and things like that. So it's evolved quite a bit, but I knew from my own life and from, just watching people around me, how important psychology was, in just your day-to-day life and your interactions, your relationships, things along that line. So that was really what drove me. But, and I've went through several iterations, Steve. I retired for a little bit. And to be honest with you, I missed seeing people and helping people, so much that's what brought me back is, just those interactions and helping people. And that's what gets me up in the morning. And really, besides my family, that's what brings me joy. So that's where that came from for me.
I like it. Being able to help other people. That's the main thing. If we can't help those other people that are on this spinning spaceship running through the universe, help alleviate some of the suffering, because it seems like that, I intentionally don't watch the news, because not that it's blocking to the stuff that's out there, but it seems like it feels like it's exponentially more overwhelming. Let's talk about how stress, the nutrition and as far as mental health. A lot of the individuals that watch this podcast, obviously they're already customers of Nature's Pure Blend. So they're already doing above and beyond what most other people are. They know that their food products aren't delivering the nutrition that they used to, let's say, and they're trying to right side their health. Some of them may already be experiencing hypertension, high blood pressure, diabetes, maybe pre-diabetes, and other types of gut issues, because now we know that the gut is like the centerpiece of everything that happens in our body. Our food goes in our mouth and it goes to our gut first. And if the gut is malfunctioning, everybody's starting to get used to this newer term called microbiome. So there's a whole little ecosystem that doesn't just live in the gut, but in the entire miles of small intestines, that entire large intestine. And that's where all of our nutrition is actually converted from those chemical processes and then pushed into the blood, and they get to the muscles and they keep our body functioning or misfunctioning because of what we're not putting in there or the wrong things that we're putting in there. But more recently, I think it's becoming a trend that people are talking about the gut-brain connection. Can you tell me, what does that mean?
Sure. there's a connection. They call it actually the gut-brain connection. And some people refer to our gut as our second brain. And it's a interconnected relationship. And really what that means, Steve, is what happens in the gut affects the brain. What happens in the brain affects your gut. And so I'll give you an example of that. Neurotransmitters, which are basically the chemical messengers that we have that communicate between cells. So I think a lot of people have all, heard about that, but they regulate mood, sleep, appetite, cognitive functions, things along that line. So that is why the reason that is important, at least from a mental health standpoint, is that the neurotransmitters that are involved with that, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, glutamate, I can go on and on. Those are either produced or influenced by what happens in your gut. So basically, the whole chemical aspect of that doesn't just happen in your brain. It actually starts in your gut. I think 90% of serotonin is actually produced in your gut, and serotonin is they call it your feel good neurotransmitter. A lot of people, like as far as medication goes, one of the things that you'll treat people with if they have like a severe or chronic depression is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, Prozac, Paxil, things along, that we've all heard of. That's really what they do. They keep serotonin in the system, but if your gut is producing enough serotonin, if you've got a healthy gut biome, then you don't need a medication so much to keep that in your system because your gut is producing enough of that to even you out, to make life tolerable, I guess, that allows you to adjust to everything instead of feeling down, depressed, anxious, all those things.
So I hear a term downregulation, and help me use it properly here, more of a medical sense. But am I understanding that if the mood of someone from anxiety has affected them in such a way that a lot of times people go to, what's the word I'm going to use? Not pleasure foods, but foods
Comfort.
that they take. Comfort food. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. And so you've had a bad day, or you had a problem with a significant other, or you didn't get the job you thought you deserved, lost your job. God, all these things that can happen in our life. You lost a loved one. Something really bad happened, just in all the different areas of our life. You find out that you have a disease. You've been diagnosed. You had that little problem, and all of a sudden you went to see a doctor. Boom. All those things hitting us with negative forward looks, they create the fear inside of us that I know you're expert at. They create fears from uncertainty. And then all of a sudden the mood that comes in after that is a depression or an anxiety. But all of those, you end up eating comfort foods because you're like, oh, I had a really bad piece of information here. So I'm going to go to wherever. I'm going to go someplace and eat a greasy cheeseburger and load it up with, an order of nachos and put all the junk on there because I deserve that. And I'm saying this because I have said this to myself. I have justified eating trash, garbage. I know better. All my life I've worked out. But you have a bad day and one of these events hits you. And then you give your body the worst things into the gut that further downregulates into the brain instead of going the opposite. How common is that?
That's extremely common. Unfortunately, as a society, we go for the quick fix. And really what you're talking about, Steve, is Um, Again, I like to boil things down to their basis, to the bottom, if you possibly can. So human behavior, is a result of habit, of course. But if you go even deeper than that, what really drives us? And they used to talk about the pain pleasure, um, you know, relationship, and we we seek pleasure and we don't want pain. Um, Actually, now what they're finding is the avoidance of discomfort is what really drives most all behavior, is the avoidance of discomfort. So we don't like to be uncomfortable. Um, and so what you're really talking about when somebody, I'm guilty of it, like, oh, this is this, I'm going to have this, and really when you get down to it, all you're doing is you're distracting yourself. Is you're taking whatever that is and you're distracting it because this supplies that for me, because you get some immediate satisfaction out of eating it. Granted, the satisfaction doesn't last very long because then you have the residual from decreased energy, cognitive decline, just like that. You feel like that. So everybody does it. Everybody regrets it. You know, in my practice, Steve, the first, we go through an intake and do that. And the two things that I always look at with somebody that comes in is I look at their sleep and I look at their nutrition, because if you're not getting enough sleep, you're not going to be able to cognitively, handle whatever's going on. Little stressors are going to become big stressors. The same thing with nutrition. If you're not fueling the engine, if everything's not going like it's supposed to, if you're not getting the proper nutrients, you're not going to be able to click on all cylinders. So it's really tough. So the first two things that we take care of, now there's other things that I look at, but the first two primary things that we try to help with are sleep and nutrition. So that's how important that they are.
Yeah, I think obviously nutrition, people use different markers, but they say something to the extent that 60%, and I've heard as high as 80%. A couple of weeks back, I had Colonel Fair on here that was an MD in the Army Reserve Med Corps. She actually said 80% of how we look and how we feel is nutrition related. So the other part, of course, I think you're exactly right. The second big part is if you're not sleeping well, many people are dealing with ongoing problems of sleep deprivation. So I want to talk about that with you and talk about when you have people that show up on the couch, let's say, and they're like, Doc, bad things have happened and you got to fix me. You're honest with them enough right out of the box to go, no quick fix. But the self-sabotage that you're currently doing by eating the garbage, your comfort food, and the anxiety that you are letting run away by creating fears of things that haven't yet happened and may never happen, you have to put that into some level of control so that they can help themselves come up out of whatever problem scenario that they have found they've fallen into. So how do you help people when they are literally self-sabotaging themselves with poor diet and living with anxious thoughts about fears that haven't happened, may never happen, but they're creating this narrative up here, and then they're compounding the narratives that they're writing up here on top of not getting good nutrition in their gut? Wow. I mean, I'm just sitting there going, that's a tall order to feel. How do you start right-siding that ship that's already capsizing.
Sure. And just start out, just to clarify, Steve, those two things are related. So you've got all this stuff going on up here, but it's so related to what you're putting into your body and vice versa. So, your mind is said and you say, I'm stressed, I'm doing this. So what do? You put something, bad in there. So the first thing that we do is first we talk to people about the importance of it. Like, most people don't realize how important nutrition is. That they just don't. They just haven't put two and two together. However,
Okay.
one of the big things, and let me step back from that. If you're talking anxiety, if you're talking depression, those are our two biggest. There are several other mental disorders or issues that we come across, but those are the two biggest that, if somebody comes in the door, those are likely two of the things that they're going with. When you look at those and you reduce those down, those are both fear underneath those. So, and what I mean by that is anxiety, if you break that down, it's really fear. Depression is really fear at its basis. So in order to control those, one of the things we need to do is, one, we need to correct how people are looking at those. So like you said, we've got all these things, these thoughts that come into our mind. We were not given an instruction manual when we were born for our mind, for our development. We just weren't. Our parents provide things, we read things and stuff like that. People don't really realize how their brains develop, how habits develop, what's going on underneath our how we look at ourselves, how we interact. We don't really see those things. And when those go off enough for somebody to come in and say, you know what, I need to go talk to somebody. I'm really having trouble. What we do is we show them that what they've been doing is they've been practicing bad habits. It is really what it comes down to. So they've been practicing, without knowing it, but they've been practicing whatever has been going on or whatever they've been doing with that for their whole life. So if you were, I'm a 5 bacon in the morning and, doing this type of person, you would explain to them, that's probably not the best way to go. Are you getting your greens? Are you doing your fruits and vegetables, or is it a well-rounded diet? So not to get into, we could get very particular there, but what I would say is it's a re-education. That's really what I do is re-educate and then show people how they can stop doing what they're doing and then replace those behaviors with something else. So, nutrition is huge in that. I mean, we do, you'd be surprised at how much, that we talk about the importance of diet and what they're doing, because we now know how important that is. Now, 30 years ago, even 20 years ago, we knew it was important. We just didn't know how important. As we're getting smarter and better in this, we've realized that it's not just one by itself. What you put into your body matters. Exactly.
Yeah, you're seeing the hand in glove or the interwovenness of. So I didn't really realize that you basically are advising your patients that are walking in there with many times life-changing, life-altering levels of stress from anxiety, from depression, the fears and the narratives underneath those. And you go straight to diet. And secondly, to their sleep, way before, and forgive me if I'm miscategorizing, your entire industry, but I think too often that there are psychologists that are willing to hand out chiclets, the Prozac or Xanax, or you mentioned another one, Adderall and all these other things. and they just script write and, okay, you're fine, go on. And you uniquely sound like you take such a more holistic approach to the patient to care enough to say, are you getting your greens? Wow. And that's got to be a powerful enough response that when they tell you no, and I don't really care about salads, I don't like those, that you bear down on that and saying, you're not getting the right things in your gut. And if we're going to fix the things upstairs, you got to start with the stuff downstairs.
No, so important. I mean, and I deal with other things also, but that is so important in what we do. The trouble that we come up against, Steve, the roadblocks that I hit with almost everybody is, again, the avoidance of discomfort. That's why people don't like to be uncomfortable. So when they're uncomfortable, they want something quick. And I deal with that on a constant basis. They want something quick. That's where the nutrition part of that is tough, is because when you change your nutrition, when you change your diet, it's not, you'll notice it, but it's not as quick as people are looking for. So we have to focus on that. So, and again, sleep, nutrition, exercise, all those, go into, because we need a well-run machine. And then on top of that, then we're going into the habits that your thoughts, why are you doing this? What's going on there? So it's really, I have to deal with, or I have to help them deal with, they're like, okay, yeah, you're telling me to change, eat more grains, or don't eat this, or, do that. But I'm here to address my anxiety, and so we have to do some stuff for that also, to show them that, hey, here's what you do for that. Here's this process for this. And at the same time, we're helping them with, hey, are you doing this? How did you do with that? It's a complete, and what we're doing is we're buying some time, because we're changing their thinking, we're changing their habits with that. And then as soon as exercise, diet, and sleep can catch up, that's when we really start chugging, Steve. That's when we're able to really get a hold of that. So,
Okay.
and I'm not saying all psychologists do that. I'm not saying they don't do that. That's just what I have found in my own life and working with patients, that works for me.
Got it. Yeah, and that does sound like a more whole process, a holistic process that you are, obviously, you're going to start helping them do what you trained as a professional to find out, what are you saying to yourself inside of your head, where a lot of the negative self-talk comes from, that creates those narratives, stories that people are hatching out of the ethers. They don't exist yet. They're stories you're telling ourselves because some event happened. They interpret the event in such a way, and then that event makes me feel this way, but the feeling comes from how you decided to perceive it in that interpretation process. Am I close?
Yes, absolutely.
Fair.
Yeah. Fear
Okay.
without the future, there's, if you're, a lot of people talk about being in the now, you know what I mean? That fear is basically, you're projecting what might happen. Oh, it's this, or it's that, or, this could happen. What we really do, and this might be a little out there, is we take information, and information is just that. It's objective information. And we either add a positive or a negative charge to that. So if something that comes in and happens and people add a positive charge, yeah, my son did this, or my daughter did that, it was a positive thing. It's straight A's or whatever. That's a positive thing, right? So they're doing that. Nobody has any trouble with those. However, if My son's having trouble with some friends at school, or my daughter, or I had disagreement with my spouse. We put a negative spin on that instead of just taking that as information. Because when you spin that, when you put the positives or negatives, that's where, again, people don't have any trouble with the positives. It's the negatives. So when you put something negative on that, and that's something that you're doing, that's where those fears come from. And that's what we practice. So if you want to get out of that, we need to practice other things. We need to practice meditation, or how to achieve peace. And, does that come from exercise? Does it come from healthy eating? Does it help? Absolutely. So again, it's all connected. The gut brain connection, we're not just, one part, it's all connected.
Wow. So this, when you hear about chronic inflammation, chronic meaning something that's not just a blip on the radar, it's a constant level of heightened stress due to an event. And it could be an external event that happened. Last year, my father passed away. That was an external event. Hated to see him, leave this particular realm, this reality. And then there's the other kind of stuff where it seems to be happening more so like with children and even people in college, where they are not getting a certain number of likes or hearts on their social media. And we're hearing these tragic stories about young people falling into depression, but some of them falling into such a deep level of depression that it's suicidal. And all that has to do with, I remember when I was going through my basic levels of psychology, not your level, but I remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's something that stuck out in my brain. And you have safety and security at the bottom of the pyramid, and then it gets up to other things as you get higher. But how are these individuals? I remember, what was her name? It was a therapist. I remember one time, and she was talking about the fact of people want acceptance from their peers, whoever they frame as their peers, even more than they crave the necessity that Maslow talked about of safety and security. Have you seen that?
No, absolutely. And really what you're talking about, Steve, is for myself, I want to be in control. I don't want somebody else controlling my my well-being. I don't want anybody else controlling my happiness. I want to be in control of that. And so what you see with kids these days, and I have 3 children. Actually, my son is home from college this weekend, and every time I see him, his phone. That's where he's at. And I was thinking about that actually before our call. And I'm like, I wonder how much time he spends looking at that. And it's anything can be good and bad. I don't think that is necessarily, that phones and, the internet and everything, technology is a bad thing, because, when we were younger, heck, even at one point they said, "Oh, books are bad. It's going to rot your mind. You're doing this," or bicycles, or it's just anything new can be bad, but it can also be good. But really, what is going on there with the likes and things like that is what we call being either internally focused or externally focused. And so, if you're worried about others, you're being externally focused. True control comes from being internally focused. So it's what you're doing, hey, wait, no, that's up to me. Steve, you control your happiness, you control your level of stress, and you control your nutrition. All those are within your control.
So there's a self-awareness here. How did you call it? The internal versus external. And so if someone is not self-aware that the stories that they're telling themselves up here, that they're not going to be liked or accepted by a peer group, they're going to be shunned, they're going to be lonely forever. And I'm being slightly facetious, but that's a really big thing. I mean, people are dying over the fact that they got, beat up on social media. When I was growing up, there was no social media. I got beat up on the playground, really, with real fist, okay? And I was sitting, in my mind, I sit there and go, how is this possible that someone could be upset because I didn't get enough likes on my post, or someone said something mean to me online? And I don't want to discount it because it's such a real part of our society today. And I'm saying that just because I care about our young people, that's our future generation that's going to be here. My niece just started college. It's her first semester uh, down in College Station next to Texas A&M. And I see when I'm talking to her and I see how her mind's functioning, how she's thinking, and it's so totally different, than our world. Because I, like you, I grew up in the 80s, right? Where you got your butt kicked on the playground, on the PE or whatever, or you fought back, and that was the only way you defended yourself. I would have gone, somebody said something mean to me, I'll take that all day long instead of getting my tail kicked by an upperclassman, right? But that's what is then, and we can't say what was then is how people should act now. This is a crisis that we have in our society, not just in America. So you wove together a couple things here, and you talked about nutrition. And obviously from a nutrition standpoint, people are so poorly nutritioned because they are eating packaged, processed foods in lieu of whole organic foods. I went into that deep with Dr. Fair, and she's like, anything that's in a package, bad, just bad. And anything, usually they talk about staying in the perimeter of the grocery store. If you just stay in the perimeter, don't go into the internal aisles. And that's where you're buying your meats, your proteins, and you're buying your vegetables and your produce. And it takes longer. And people are so in such a hurry, me included. I'd rather go buy me, I love Tom Below, the impact theory. He was part of the founders of Quest Nutrition. I started eating Quest bars 8-9 years ago when he was just coming out with those, because it was like a meal in a bar, in a wrapper. Bad. As good as those are compared to all the other protein bars, we're taking in so many things and not giving ourselves the right things. So therefore we start off, when stress hits us, at whatever thing that's stressful for us, we don't have the fundamental building blocks chemically in our gut, in our system, that are properly feeding our brain. So we're sitting there with a nutrient deficient brain, and then stress impacts us, whatever you call
it. Absolutely, Steve, because nutrition, sleep, I look at those truly, exercise, I look at those as your foundation. That's where your house is going to be built. So if you have a strong foundation and something happens, so if you're putting, if you're getting sleep, if you're putting the right things into your body, you're doing what you're supposed to with your body, exercise, things along that line. If something hits you, it's not going to be a fatal blow or, a knockout blow. You're going to roll with that a lot easier. Now, if you're not getting the proper nutrition, sleep, etc., when something hits you, it's a much bigger blow for you. It really is. And that's why people, you're like, why did that impact me so much? Or why did it, it really is. You've got to look at this as your foundation. If you have a strong foundation, life is going to happen. It happens to all of us. However, you're going to be able to weather that a lot better with a really strong foundation.
So if we are being proactive and taking the right supplements, because we can't always get it from food and we all have busy lives. So in absence of getting something pure and organic, it's not packaged, prepackaged, then we use supplements. So if someone walks into your office and says, "Doc, I got a problem," and you get to check off, nope, taking good supplements, healthy diet, and they're paying attention to their sleep, they're getting 6 plus, maybe even more toward 8 hours, and then a tragedy happens to them, you can help them. You can jump so much quicker to helping them deal and cope with this event in their life, as opposed to finding someone that is already hypertension, maybe high blood pressure, pre-diabetic, um, already has gut issues, IBS, all these other kind of things. They can't, they don't, they know their stomach isn't working well, so they're having problems. I mean, some of the simple stuff like, oh, what's the wheat allergy? They're
Oh, gluten.
allergic to gluten alert allergies. A lot of food allergies now, more than I ever heard of before in my life. Um, you're so much further ahead of the curve to be able to help them work through their scenario if they have those strong foundational pieces of nutrition and sleep. So you've talked about nutrition. What do you do when someone tells you, "I'm an insomniac, doc," or "I can go to sleep, but then I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't go back to sleep"? How do you start helping them with that particular problem that's kind of like the twin or tier of good nutrition and good sleep? How do you help them with their sleep?
No, absolutely. Well, first we go through what they're doing, because in order to have good sleep, um, you need to have a routine. You absolutely do. And actually, Steve, I'll expand that. Anything you do in life towards success is with a routine, period.
Mm,
The successful
mhm.
people, if you look across the board, successful people have a routine. So, and what is routine? It's really habit, right? However, it's setting aside time to do that. So, they talk about blue light, from our devices and things like that. I used to read before I went to bed. I mean, that was when I was growing up, that's what I did. Um, read, every night, that's what I did. Now everything is on our devices, right? So you have that, the temperature of the room, what are you doing beforehand? What are you eating? What are you eating, before you go to bed? Caffeine, huge, we try to correct all of that. But the racing thoughts, Steve, the racing thoughts are a habit that, like I said, people weren't given an instruction book, how should I develop, what should the brain be doing properly? The brain's job the mind is to categorize. That's, we've got so much stimuli coming in, and I call it a Rolodex. Hopefully everybody remembers what a Rolodex was. It's a little outdated, but you Rolodex anything. But I've got a tree here that I'm looking at, but so that's a tree. But if you really look and you're going, you know what? That's a tree. You look at the branches, they're different. They're not just categorized. And that's really what our mind has done to us, even with our thoughts and any other problems that we have. Your mind thinks that's its job. Well, I've got to think through all those things, because if I don't think through them, I can't problem solve them, right? So I'm doing this just in case those things happen. Horse bucky. That is not the case. What do? You practice that every day, and you practice that every night. So can you imagine how well developed that habit is in your mind? So what we need to do is we need to unwind that, and we need to start developing healthy habits. And so healthy thinking habits are toward relaxation. And where we start with that, this real briefly, is we break that cycle. That's what we do. We teach them how to break that cycle. Because if I can break that for a second, I can then grow that second to 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Or if I have something that comes up where I'm like, oh, that makes me anxious, I know how to return myself what I call peace. I know how to do that. I can stop that. But I do that because I practice that. And I practice that every day. I don't practice it haphazardly. I practice that very specifically in that I do it several times an hour and I have to remind myself. So, um, nutrition. So with supplements. So I, I take Nature's Pure Blend, right? Can I forget to take those? Absolutely. You know how I avoid not forgetting to take those, Steve, is I have an alarm. The same way I do with my practicing, calm and peace. I do the same exact thing. If I don't set aside a time for that, I'm, I call it flying rudderless. You really don't have a plan. So if you're not practicing these things and you have to set aside a specific time, book after book talks about this. Habits are great, but if you're just going, yeah, I think I'll do that, unless you schedule specific time for it, it's really not going to happen because life happens and there's going to be other things that interfere with that.
You mentioned a book there that came to my mind. I think it's Atomic Habits by James Clear. He refers to a process like what you're talking about. You're given a specific time
That one
and,
right
oh,
there.
that you go. Of course you have it right there or within reach. Of course you do. And he uses the concept of habit stacking. And so when I added a new habit to my deal, like I know in the mornings I have my supplements broken in between what I take in the morning because they're going to give me energy and they're going to give me the nutrients I need for my body, for my brain. And then I have a separate set that I actually have in the set on my in the bathroom right next to where I brush my teeth at night before I go to bed. So use when I get up in the morning, first thing I do is I pour the water into the coffee machine. I'll make myself, a pot of coffee, grind some beans, all that kind of stuff. But in that same little section that's on the coffee bar, it's not Amy's favorite place for my stuff, but it's my place that I have. That's my little kind of bucket, if you will, of the supplements that I take. And why do I put them there? I think James Clear talks about this. You have to make it so simple, Geico commercial that a caveman could do it. Okay. So how do I do that? I go hide them up in a cabinet. Then I got to physically remember, mentally remember, got to go to the cabinet, open the cabinet. You're like, oh, come on, Steve, really? No, really. I take away every obstacle. My dad, I've talked about him for a lot. He used to use this term as a Marine. You never want to lose a battle for preventable reasons. Just take away the obstacle. How do I do that? I don't hide it in the cabinet that I can forget about it and not see it. No, it's right there next to my coffee pot. So I'm putting the caffeine or the coffee in there, putting the water in there. So I added another habit to my supplements and added a new supplement, which was, it's called Baja Gold. It's sea salt. And it's got all these other amazing things. And our bodies are so dehydrated and they don't have these nutrients. So I added that. So that went to there. So in the morning when I'm pouring my water in there, I also have a glass of water before I even have my first cup of coffee. And I take, it says you can take up to half a teaspoon. I usually take a pinch and I throw that in my mouth with the water. You can put it in the water to stir it, whatever works for you. But you giving yourself supplements. And what I do is by having that there's the routine you're talking about, that I literally make it an obstacle that I trip over if I don't do it. I can't not see it. And I want to be so healthy because I care about my family so much. And I care about other people that I want to make a difference in this world. It makes it a no-brainer. And then the same thing, I put my, the stuff that I take like ashwagandha before I sleep at night and chamomile, things like I put that next to my toothbrush. So when I get my toothpaste, it's right there. I can't go, oh, I forgot. No, it's right there in front of me. And boom, I got it. So by what you're talking about, creating routines, regimen, habit stacking, you can condition yourself physically and psychologically, so that when we do bump into the things that go boo, we are so much more capable and are not going to be drowning. And so when we come to that's a professional like you, we're already got the good sleep patterns down because we're sleeping in a cold environment. We're taking away the distractions like blue light and reading things on our phone and being mentally distracted right up into the point to where we just exhausted fall over. This is what you're actually preaching.
So one of the things that we can do is, instead of looking at it, you're benefiting yourself. You really are doing this for your family and your relationships, because the more cylinders you can hit on, the better you are going to be as a person. The less stressed you're going to be. You're not going to react. There's so many things that go along with that.
I think what you're actually coming kind of full circle back to is the question I started off with you is, why do you do what you do and the how that you do? And a lot of people focus on the what and the how, and what and the how. You know, when you ask somebody, what is it that you do? And they tell you what they do as a job, right? And they'll tell you that they do it very well because they got this kind of education and they've added this certification and they've been at it for this many years and they up to those are what and how factors of who we all have as an identity. But very few people get to the foundational underpinning, and that is, why do you do what you do? That's why we started off with that. Why, Jim, did you become a psychologist? All those years of education and training and tests and exams and late nights at the library, all those kind of things for years. And you had this deep underpinning why that said, I want my life to matter because I want to help people suffer less. And I think if we leave something here with the people that are viewing this or listening to this, if they haven't found that underpinning purpose, the raison d'etre, that's the Texan trying to speak French. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. The reason to be, okay? I remembered that from my French class. I don't know how it just came out of my head. Raison d'etre. The reason to be. Why are you functioning on this planet that a higher power put us here? Let's call it that, okay? And if you're an atheist, okay, then you're just an evolution of something that's also amazing. There's something reason, there's a purpose. And if that why is your family, or it's a bigger thing of trying to make the world a better place, or trying to lead a company, let's say, or whatever it is, you got to find whatever that is for you. And then the regimented habits don't become chores, that they're negative and, I got to go take my supplements again. I have to go exercise and, I can't take my phone to bed with me because it keeps me awake. Instead, your attitude changes because I'm going to bed at a regular time and putting my phone aside to let my brain rest, because sleep, Dr. Eastlick told me, and my nutrition are the two most important things that I have the ability to change. And if I'm changing those for the better, not just for me, but for the bigger purpose, my why, all of a sudden they feel different. Am I on the right track?
No, absolutely. Absolutely, Steve, because it is bigger. Again, people have trouble sometimes doing things for themselves. They really do. I had a very smart person once tell me, treat everybody like small children and rabbits. Now, I don't know why they said rabbits, but here's what they were getting at. What they were saying is, treat everybody, with respect and like they're small children. They might not understand what they're doing is not out of, negativity or meanness or anything like that. Treat people in that respect. What you're really getting at, Steve, is we need a foundation, is really what we need to do. To be the best person that you can be, your house, to have the best house that you can have, it has to be built on a good foundation. And I'm here to tell you that that is based on sleep, that's based on nutrition, and it's based on exercise. It really is. Those are our key things. Now, there's a mental component to that that I go into much more with folks. But the best decisions you can make, Steve, the best decisions you can make are planned. They really are. The worst decisions we make are impulsive. And when we go back to this, that's what you're doing this for. You really are doing this. You're doing it to be a better person, but look at it differently. You're actually doing it to be a better dad or a better spouse or a better son or daughter or a friend, better coworker. When you're firing on all cylinders, you are the best, you are a better person. All that stuff is not going to bombard you as much as it would. Life is still going to happen. I'm not saying that. It's just not going to hit you as hard as it would have before.
Well, I know we're coming close to our time, Doc. So, well, first of all, you've taught us all so much. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to ask you if you will come back again, because I think what's going to happen is you have really built the priority before you start jumping into some other techniques. I call them tips and tricks of how people can deal with stress, of how they can deal with traumatic events. You've laid a foundation here and said, take care of your nutrition, build your habits, make sure you're getting the right amount of sleep. And you have to focus on those sooner rather than later, build a habit, build the routine. And would you come back and give us the part 2 at a future date to give us, okay, now that everybody's got their routine down, now when the uncertainty, the unexpectedness that life throws at us, can you give us some mental skills that can help us cope with the pain and suffering that comes from those unexpected mental stressors?
Steve, I would love to do that. I'd love to share what I've learned and what I've seen work consistently, because that's, like I said, that's why I was put here. I'm here to help people, and as many people as I can help, I would enjoy doing that.
Well, great. You've really given us a lot, and thank you for giving us your time and your expertise, and helping us remember that the most important thing that we can do to better our life are things that are actually within our control.
Absolutely.
We got to do those first. So thank you, my friend. I appreciate the time. Always good to hang out with you. And one of these days, you've told me about the beautiful lakes up there where you live in Coeur d'Alene. I got to come up there and visit one of these days.
Well, it's low 40s and rainy today, so come in the spring or the summer, but absolutely. And I Steve, always, I enjoy talking to you, and I've enjoyed today. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, sir.
You bet.